Welcome back to Scripture Horror. But before we dive in, there's something you need to know. After tonight's episode, you might seriously reconsider ever delivering pizza or grabbing a late-night coffee in a quiet little town again. Because tonight, we're uncovering 6 chilling true horror stories from tiny Oregon towns. Places so small most people don't even realize they exist. These aren't myths. They aren't campfire tales. These are real events, things that happen to real people. Like the pizza runner who drove into a town where every single person was frozen mid-motion, as if time had stopped, and the barista who wandered into an old cave system only to find something hiding inside that could perfectly mimic her voice, down to the last breath. And the worst part? The local authorities did everything they could to make sure these stories never reached the public. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because every day we dig up the stories people wish would stay buried. Now shut off your phone, lock your doors, settle in, because what you're about to hear will make you think twice before you ever step foot into a small town again. Our first story comes from Antelope, Oregon, a place with barely a handful of residents, and one pizza delivery that turned into something no one has ever been able to explain. My name is Sarah Martinez, and I've been delivering pizza for Tony's Pizza in Antelope, Oregon for years. And yes, it's that Antelope, the town that made national news decades ago when a cult tried to poison an entire county. People think that story ended with arrests and deportations. They're wrong. I grew up here, left for college, then came back with a baby and no money. Emma's father, Marcus, had vanished on a pizza delivery years earlier. Car running, headlights on, pizza still warm on a doorstep. Police claimed he'd abandoned us, but I knew he wouldn't. Delivering pizzas for 3 years taught me every back road and every kind of house, from drug dens reeking of chemicals to customers answering the door covered in blood claiming they were cleaning fish. Small-town Oregon is strange, but nothing prepared me for what happened on February 12th. The dinner rush was fading when Tony handed me a slip that made my stomach drop. 11 Meadowbrook Lane, the same address Marcus disappeared from. The same customer name, David Chen. The same order, 1 large pepperoni. My voice shook as I told Tony, but he waved it off. Different customer. House has been empty for decades, probably a GPS error. But the order was real, paid online, and something deep inside me knew this wasn't a coincidence. I loaded my bag into my Civic and drove into a February night so dark the headlights felt useless. The GPS route matched the one from Marcus's case file. I passed the old Rajneesh compound, now decaying behind rusted fences. Past the cemetery where some poisoning victims lay buried. Past the historical marker tourists take pictures of without knowing the whole story. Minutes into the drive, strange signals flickered on the radio. Old songs from the 80s slowed to a crawl, distorted like dying batteries. Between songs came fragments of news reports. Bioterror attack in Wasco County, hundreds affected, unknown pathogen, then static. Even my CDs sounded warped. The GPS guided me toward the foothills, but the map looked wrong. Roads that should have been there were gone. Roads that never existed appeared clearly labeled. The arrival time kept jumping wildly. I remembered Marcus's file. His car had been found on Meadowbrook Lane, a dirt track leading to an empty foundation where a house burned down on the day of the poisonings. My phone signal vanished completely as I drove deeper. Then the GPS told me to turn left. The dirt road was lined with weathered signs, 7, 9, 13 houses that had never existed in daylight. Whenever I looked directly at them, they faded like stars disappearing when you stare at them. But in my peripheral vision, I saw porches, windows, silhouettes. 11 Meadowbrook Lane sat at the end of the track, exactly where the GPS promised. A 2-story yellow house with glowing windows and smoke drifting from the chimney. A blue pickup truck in the driveway. The same truck described in Marcus's missing person report. I parked behind it, grabbed my phone to call the customer, but the screen showed no signal, and an impossible time, 8:17 p.m., February 12, 1984. The phone rang anyway. The ringtone was old, like a rotary phone. Sarah, Marcus's voice only hollow, tired, wrong. You came back. I almost dropped the phone. Marcus, where have you been? Emma's been asking about you. Don't get out of the car, he said urgently. They're watching from the windows. I looked up. Every window glowed warmly, and silhouettes stood perfectly still inside, Men, women, children, unmoving and staring at my car. "Marcus, what is this place?" "It's February 12th, 1984, he said. "The day the Rajneeshis poisoned the salad bars in the Dallas. Except here, the day never ended. We're stuck in the loop." Everyone who was here that night. The front door opened. An elderly woman in a red robe stepped out, steel-gray hair, eyes like broken glass. I knew that face, Ma Anan Sheila. She was supposed to be imprisoned and deported decades ago. Yet here she was, looking exactly like she had 40 years ago. "The bioweapon wasn't just salmonella," Marcus whispered. "It trapped them, made them immortal, anchored to this day. They've been collecting people, anyone who gets too close. Drivers, hikers, real estate agents. We're all here, all stuck." Figures emerged from the house, cult members seen in old news footage, supposedly long gone. They moved toward my car in perfect silence, their synchronization unsettling, their eyes reflecting light like animals. "Why am I not trapped?" I asked. "You haven't eaten anything from them," Marcus said. "Food, water, even the air if you stay too long. It infects you. You're still connected to 2024. Sheila approached my window and pressed a handwritten note against the glass. "Come inside, Sarah. Emma is waiting for you." My blood froze. "How do they know about Emma?" I told them, Marcus said, voice trembling. "Years of torture. They know everything. They arranged this whole delivery. They've been waiting." More figures seeped from the house, victims who'd vanished over the decades, all wearing that same peaceful expression. "There's one way to end the loop," Marcus said. "Get to the source. The device in the basement. But you'd have to go inside." Sheila raised another note. "Your daughter dies tonight if you don't come inside." "Our people are everywhere." My babysitter lived at 40 Oak Street, written clearly at the bottom of the note. I threw my car into reverse and sped away, cultists scattering as their synchronization shattered. Some screamed with inhuman, air-leaking sounds. Behind me, a warm glow followed, like the house itself was moving. I wasn't running. I was buying time. I drove straight to the Antelope Community Center, where the cult had once held meetings. If they'd built a device powerful enough to warp reality, it would be somewhere central. But when I arrived, every light was on. The lot was filled with vehicles from every decade, cars belonging to people who'd vanished. I tried calling 911. Static. Tried the FBI tip line. Static. Called my babysitter, she answered calmly. "Emma's fine. She's right here." My daughter's voice came on the line, terrified. "Mommy, strangers keep asking where you keep your keys." The line cut. I ran toward the building. The doors opened by themselves. Sheila stood there smiling. "Welcome home, Sarah." Inside, the community hall was set up exactly like 1984, long tables, paper plates, little cups of red wine. The air smelled of incense, disinfectant, and something rotten beneath it. Dozens of people sat waiting, all wearing the same tranquil expression. Missing persons from across the years. "The Last Supper," Sheila said. "Drink with us and your daughter goes free." "Refuse, and she joins us anyway." "Where's the device?" I demanded. Sheila blinked. "There is no device." My stomach dropped. "The loop exists because we will it," she said. "The bioweapon gave us power to enforce our will. Paradise forever. No aging, no death." I realized then they weren't clinging to immortality. They were hiding from something that was supposed to happen on February 12th, 1984. "The cult was supposed to end that day," I said. "You lost. You built a prison to avoid accepting it." Her expression fractured, revealing decades of desperation beneath. She handed me a cup. I lifted it, pretending to drink but spilling most down my shirt. Even the drops that touched my tongue tasted like metallic death. Sheila relaxed, believing I'd accepted my place. Everyone raised their cups. I hurled mine at the window. The glass shattered, and so did the illusion. The warm hall vanished. I stood in a burned-out ruin. Skeletons slumped in disintegrating clothes. The people who'd seemed alive were long dead. The loop hadn't preserved paradise. It had preserved a moment of mass death. Reality, suppressed for decades, crashed back. The building shook violently. Outside, engines roared to life, cars that had been idle for 40 years. Their owners were finally free. Sheila wasn't. Her flesh melted away, revealing the corpse she truly was, yet she lunged with impossible strength. "If we can't have paradise," she shrieked, "then everyone burns." I dove through the broken window as the building collapsed, her scream fading behind me. When I reached my car, my phone displayed the correct date, February 12th, 2024. Voicemails from Jennifer begged to know where I was. Emma was fine, just a normal night. The next morning, Marcus's truck was found in the ruins of the community center along with remains of dozens of missing people. The official report blamed a gas leak. No one questioned it. I quit Tony's Pizza and started working at the Antelope Historical Society, helping people learn what really happened here. Some knowledge saves lives. Some knowledge stops people from accepting deliveries they shouldn't. Sometimes, late at night, I still smell incense drifting across the hills. Still hear rotary phones ringing far away. The loop is broken, but some echoes don't fade. I keep Marcus's picture on my desk, not because I'm mourning him, but because he was a hero trapped in hell for years who still saved Emma and me. Emma's 8 now. She asks about her father. I tell her he died saving people. She accepts that. She doesn't need to know that sometimes, when I drive the back roads of Antelope, I see a blue pickup in my rearview mirror, always distant, always watching, making sure no one else takes a final delivery into the dark. In small-town Oregon, delivering pizza isn't just a job. Sometimes you're delivering hope. Sometimes justice. And sometimes you're the last line between the living and the hungry dead. My name is Amy Chen, and I've been working as a barista for only a few months, but that's long enough to learn that the morning rush at a cafe can chew you up if you're not fast, focused, and fearless. I started at Brew and View Cafe right after graduating high school, hoping to save money for college. I loved the smell of roasted beans, the soft chatter of regulars, and the way sunlight streamed through the cafe's giant front windows. Brew and View sat on the main strip of Bandon, Oregon, 2 blocks from the beach, always buzzing with tourists in the summer. To me, it seemed like the perfect job. Good money, friendly customers, and a boss who actually cared. I was young, optimistic, and completely unprepared for what I was about to uncover. The cafe itself was simple. A polished counter with our elegant Italian espresso machine humming like a living creature, pastry cases filled with croissants and muffins, and a dozen small tables scattered around the sunlit room. The basement held our storage area, stocked with extra supplies, and the back office was where Mike, my boss, spent hours wrestling paperwork. Out the rear door, a narrow strip of employee parking sat beside the dumpster, followed by sand dunes and a short path that led straight to the ocean. My daily routine was predictable. Arrive at 4 a.m., unlock the cafe, wake up the machines, and prep for the 5 a.m. opening. Mike usually joined me by 6, and we powered through the early rush together. Summer mornings were always intense, tourists grabbing coffee before whale-watching tours or long beach days. But I enjoyed the energy. I loved the art of making a perfect latte, the rhythm of preparing orders, the familiarity of regulars. I felt like my life was finally heading in the right direction. Until July 4th. Everyone in Bandon knows July 4th is chaos, the biggest beach festival of the year. We planned to serve half the town that morning, and I was excited about the tips and proud that Mike trusted me to open alone while he picked up extra supplies. I pulled into the parking lot at 3:30 a.m., earlier than usual. Fog smothered the coast so heavily I could barely see 5 feet ahead. As I made my way around to the back door, fishing for my keys, something made my breath freeze in my chest. The metal door was shredded. 4 enormous gashes ran straight down the steel from top to bottom, deep gouges where metal had curled outward like torn skin. Each claw mark was nearly 2 inches wide, spaced perfectly apart, and deep enough that I could slip my fingers inside the grooves. But the door wasn't the part that made my knees tremble. A thick black trail, sticky and wet, stretched from the dumpster all the way toward the ocean. It wasn't tar. It wasn't oil. It looked disturbingly organic, like blood that nature hadn't intended. The smell rising from it was sweet and rotten, like flowers decaying in stagnant water. I should have called someone. Instead, I convinced myself it was a prank, a drunk tourist, a vandal with weird tools, anything human. I managed to pry the damaged door open and stepped inside. The cafe looked normal. Nothing missing, nothing broken. everything neatly in place, as if the morning would unfold exactly like any other. I tried to bury the unease clawing at my stomach and went through my routine, refusing to look at the ruined door again. At 6, one of our oldest regulars walked in, Mrs. Patterson. She ordered her usual double-shot espresso, smiling kindly at me as always. But her expression shifted when she brought up a local dog named Rusty. "He'd vanished 3 nights earlier," she said, "gone without a trace from a fenced yard." But that wasn't the part that made my hands shake as I steamed her milk. She whispered about strange gashes on the fence, huge claw marks, and a sweet, awful smell lingering in the air. The same smell I breathed in earlier. I tried to ignore the dread building inside me and kept working. After the rush died down around 8, curiosity finally won. I went to the office and pulled up the security footage from the night before. At first, everything looked ordinary. Empty parking area, distant headlights on the street. Then, at about 2:17 a.m., something slid into view near the dumpster. At first, I thought it was a person crouching. But as it rose, stretching far taller than any human should, my stomach flipped. Its limbs bent in unnatural angles, like its body didn't understand how bones were supposed to work. It moved in a scuttling, spider-like way, smooth, fast, unsettling. Even in the darkness, the camera caught the shape of its enormous frame, 8 or 9 feet tall. Limbs that looked like arms and legs but weren't quite either, and when it turned, tiny reflections glimmered across multiple eyes. Too many eyes. But what terrified me more than its appearance was its behavior. It wasn't rummaging through trash like an animal. It was sorting it. Carefully, methodically. It laid items out in tidy piles, coffee cups, wrappers, even a newspaper, examining each one like it was collecting information. Studying patterns. Learning. After nearly an hour, it approached our back door. I watched it trace the frame, examine the handle, feel the metal with fingers that were far too long. Then 4 claws extended from its hand, huge black talons that carved through the door like it was paper. When it finished, it gathered some of the sorted trash and retreated toward the sea, leaving the black trail I'd found earlier. By the time Mike arrived around noon, I had watched the footage at least 20 times. When I showed him, all color drained from his face. He wanted to call the police immediately. Officer Davis arrived, watched the video, and shook his head. "Could be someone in a costume," he said. Holiday pranks get weird. He filed a damage report and left, unconvinced. Mike tried to reassure me, but it was obvious he didn't believe his own words. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw claws slicing metal. Around 2 a.m., I gave in to the anxiety and drove by the cafe just to ease my mind. But when I arrived, my heart nearly stopped. The brand new back door, installed only hours earlier, was ruined again. But this time, the gashes weren't random. They spelled my name, Amy. The letters were carved deep into the metal, each stroke unmistakably deliberate. My name tag flashed through my mind. This thing had seen me, learned my name, chosen me. I barely slept. The next morning, when I arrived for my shift, something waited for me on the counter, lined up neatly beside the espresso machine. 5 human fingers. Freshly severed, still wearing cheap tourist rings I recognized from local beach shops. I screamed for Mike. The police were called again. This time, they brought detectives, collected evidence, questioned me about enemies I didn't have. I told them about the creature in the footage, but they exchanged glances like they were talking to someone unstable. Even Mike's expression shifted. The cafe closed for 3 days as the investigation dragged on. During that time, 3 more tourists went missing. The news blamed the ocean. I knew better. When we reopened, I asked Mike for daytime shifts only. For a while, everything seemed fine. I started to believe the nightmare had ended until I found the nest. I was restocking supplies in the basement when I noticed several ceiling tiles in the far corner were misaligned. I got a ladder and peeked into the crawl space above the room. What I saw nearly knocked me off the rungs. It was a shrine of missing lives. Wallets, phones, jewelry, purses. Dozens of personal items arranged with disturbing precision across wooden beams. But the photos were worse. Hundreds of them. Tourists smiling at the beach, hiking, eating, enjoying their vacations. Every face familiar from recent reports. And in the center of the display was a separate section dedicated entirely to me. Pictures taken through the cafe windows. Shots of me working, walking to my car, locking up at night. Weeks of surveillance. I was in nearly 100 photos. And that smell. The sweet, rotting smell hung thick in the crawl space. The creature had been living above us. Before I could climb down, the lights went out. The espresso machine died. Registers went silent. Even my phone lost all power. The rest of the street still glowed through the windows. It was only us, only the cafe that had gone dark. Then the voices started. "Amy," Mrs. C's. Patterson's voice, drifting from somewhere above me. "Amy, honey, could you come help me?" Then another voice. Tom Bradley, one of our regulars. "Amy, I'm hurt. I need help." But Tom was supposed to be at work. And Mrs. supposed to be at work. Patterson had left hours earlier. More voices joined in. Voices I recognized from customers who had gone missing. They echoed from vents, from walls, from the basement. Perfect imitations. Impossible to tell if they were coming from one creature or many. Then my mother's voice floated down through the darkness. "Amy, sweetheart, come downstairs." My mother lived in Portland, hours away. This thing had never met her. But it could mimic any voice it heard, or any voice of the people it had taken. Something began moving above me. Heavy, deliberate steps shaking the ceiling. Tiles crashed down. Wood groaned. I grabbed the largest knife behind the counter as the creature crawled through the ceiling space, tracking me by sound. Then it spoke in my own voice. "Amy, don't be scared." I pointed the steam wand of the espresso machine toward the opening above me. The machine still had gas, still had heat. More tiles fell as the creature lowered itself into the room. Up close, its body was a monstrous mix of spider and human form, limbs bending in ways bones should never bend. Black, slick flesh dripped with seawater and something darker. Its face stretched long, too many eyes watching me at once. "Amy," it said in my voice, "I've collected so many friends for you. They're waiting in the caves." It lunged. I blasted it with superheated steam. The creature shrieked, a metallic, tearing sound, and its skin blistered where the steam hit. While it writhed, I sprinted to the back door, unlocked it manually, and fled to my car. It burst through the cafe seconds later, racing after me with terrifying speed, flowing over obstacles with its many limbs. I barely escaped, driving straight to the police station. When I returned with Officer Davis, the creature was gone. Only destruction and that black substance remained. No one believed me. Not really. Not the officers, not the detectives, not even Mike. After days of questioning and suspicion, I quit and moved home to Portland. But running didn't save me. The nightmares began first, dreams of the cafe filled with the missing tourists, all turning to look at me and saying in unison, "Amy, we're waiting." Then small objects appeared in my room. Seashells, sand, a brew and view napkin smeared with black substance and my name. Phone calls followed, my own voice whispering, "When are you coming home?" The disappearances in Bandon have only increased. Authorities blame riptides. I know better. Something lives in the sea caves. Something that studies people, collects them, mimics them, waits for them. And it's waiting for me. Some nights, when the world is silent, I hear the ocean even miles inland. I hear the voices beneath the waves calling my name. And the worst part? Some nights I feel myself wanting to answer. My name is Frank Morrison, and for years I've been running from everything that ever mattered. Morrison's Market in Fossil, Oregon was never supposed to be permanent. Nothing in my life was supposed to be permanent. I grew up in Portland watching my father drink himself into the grave after the lumber mill shut down. My mother worked 3 jobs just to keep us warm in the winters. I swore I would never become them, trapped, exhausted, drifting through life until it finally crushed me. But somehow, there I was at 26, scanning barcodes in a town of barely 500 people, slipping $20 bills from the register into my pocket just to pretend I still had control over something. The locals always called me Pete Morrison's nephew, no matter how many times I corrected them. Pete owned the store, and he gave me the job when I arrived 5 years ago with nothing but a backpack and a story about wanting a fresh start. In reality, I'd been evicted, dumped, and too ashamed to tell anyone. Fossil was supposed to be temporary, a place to save money, figure out my next move. Instead, it became a cage I locked myself inside. And what happened starting on November 12, 2019, made me realize some cages are exactly where you're meant to rot. Morrison's Market sits on Main Street like a tombstone marking the grave of small-town American hope. Built in 1954, it has that fake nostalgia tourists adore. Wooden floors that creak like warnings, aisles so narrow you brush against strangers, fluorescent lights that flicker like a heartbeat running out of time. The building used to be a pharmacy when Fossil had enough life to support one. Dr. Abraham Wexler ran it for decades before he locked the doors one night and drove his Buick straight into the John Day River. They never recovered his body, only the pill bottles scattered on the riverbank like breadcrumbs dropped by someone who changed their mind at the last moment. Pete bought the place cheap in '89, turning it into a grocery store. He kept Dr. Wexler's old prescription counter in the back, threw a tablecloth over it, and used it for storage. Late at night, when I did inventory, I would sometimes swear I heard pill bottles rattling behind the cloth. Pete always said the building just settled. My register was an IBM relic from 1993, the same year it was installed. Pete bragged about it constantly, calling it sturdy, classic, even trustworthy, though it rebooted at random and the receipt printer jammed if you breathed too close to it. The barcode scanner beeped like a flatlining monitor, and the cash drawer only opened if you hit it with your fist in exactly the right rhythm. Every morning at 6 a.m., I flipped the switches and listened to the store groan awake. The fluorescent lights flicked on one by one, spreading their sick yellow glow across the aisles. The ancient PA system crackled with static that almost sounded like whispers. November 12th started exactly like that. Overcast sky the color of dishwater, wind cutting through the street like something searching for weak spots in the walls. Pete had driven to Bend for his monthly doctor's appointment, leaving me alone to handle the morning regulars. Mrs. Bess's. Helen Crawford arrived first, 6 a.m., sharp like always. 92 years old, buying her black coffee, frosted donut, and a pack of Marlboro Lights. She'd come at that exact time every single Tuesday for as long as I'd worked there. "Morning, Helen," I said as I scanned her things. She smiled with those rheumy blue eyes. "Such a nice boy. Your mother must be proud." I didn't bother correcting her anymore. Small towns believe whatever comforts them. At 6:30, Tom Bradley entered. He bought the same energy drink and cigarettes, paid in exact change, and avoided eye contact like it cost money. His hands were always stained with something dark oil or dirt, or something worse. At 7:10, Sarah Kellerman came with her weekly groceries, milk, bread, ground beef, frozen peas, and a bottle of wine she tried to hide under the other items. The same people. The same times. The same purchases. For years, I'd watched this town live the exact same day over and over again, and somehow I still convinced myself I wasn't like them. I had plans. I was going somewhere. Then at 7:30, someone new walked through the door. She looked maybe 30, wearing a gray wool coat that was expensive once but had the style of something from a 1930s movie. Her hair was arranged in perfect finger waves. Lipstick, the shade of dry blood. She moved like she knew every inch of the place, heading straight for aisle 3 to pick up a bottle of bleach, then aisle 5 for exactly 3 cans of corn, then to the freezer section for peas. At the register, she placed the items down in a careful pattern bleach first, then the corn arranged in a triangle, peas on top. "Will that be all?" I asked. She didn't look at me, didn't blink, just stared at the register display with eyes like black water. The total was $8.47. She handed me exact change, a 5, 2 ones, a quarter, 2 dimes, 2 pennies. The coins felt unnaturally cold, like they came from a freezer. After she left, I raised the receipt to the light. The first letters of each item formed BCCCP. Meaningless. I tossed it aside. 10 minutes later, another stranger arrived. A man in his 40s wearing overalls caked with red Oregon mud. He bought a hammer, white bread, and AA batteries. Again, exact change. Again, too cold money. Again, that vacant stare at the register display like he was reading something only visible to him. By noon, 6 strangers had come through. Their receipts, when arranged in order and read by the first letter of each purchase, spelled out HELP trapped. My hands shook. My lunch slid off the counter. 6 unrelated customers couldn't coordinate such a message. Not unless they weren't unrelated at all. I grabbed the customer log, a dusty 3-ring binder where Pete kept credit card transactions. I flipped through pages. There was Mrs. Carr. Crawford every Tuesday at 6 a.m. for the last 20 years. Tom Bradley, every Tuesday at 6:30. Sarah Kellerman, every Tuesday at 7:10. The same people, the same times, unchanged for decades. But none of the strangers appeared anywhere in the book. Not once. More arrived in the afternoon. More old-fashioned clothing. More exact change. More freezing money. Their receipt spelled a second message, "You are already dead." That night I called Pete. "Do you know a woman, maybe 30, finger wave hair, bought bleach and corn today?" Silence. Then, "Frank, what woman?" I checked the sales footage. "You served 13 customers total. I saw every transaction. What about the man with the hammer? What about the woman with the knitting yarn? Frank, you might need a day off." When he hung up, I drove back to the store and checked the security footage myself. I watched my shift play back. Watched myself scanning groceries, counting change, handing out receipts. But I was alone. Talking to empty air. Taking money from no one. Bagging groceries for ghosts. Panic clawed at my throat. I dug through Fossil's history, scouring old newspapers and county records. What I found froze me more than any Oregon winter ever had. In 1993, the same year they installed my register, a gas leak formed beneath Main Street. Carbon monoxide seeped into every building for days. By the time anyone realized, 47 people were dead. Every shop owner, every customer, every clerk inside those buildings, including Dr. Wexler, found slumped over his prescription counter. Including Helen Crawford with her morning coffee. Including Tom Bradley buying cigarettes. Including Sarah Kellerman shopping with her children, all found exactly where I saw them every day. The leak was traced to a faulty connection installed during Pete's renovation. The county sued him, and he went bankrupt. Records said he died in 2004 heart attack from stress. Morrison's Market was condemned in 2006. The building had been empty ever since. I was serving dead customers in a dead store owned by a dead man. But I wasn't dead. The record showed no Frank Morrison among the victims. Unless... I rushed home, tearing through my documents, birth certificate, license, social security card. All normal. But when I searched county death records the next morning, my name appeared. Frank Morrison. Born March 3, 1993. Died March 3, 2019. Apparent suicide. Carbon monoxide poisoning in a closed garage. Found weeks later by a landlord. It happened on my birthday. The same night my girlfriend left me. The night I got evicted. The night I sat in my running car and let the world go dim. I had died. And somehow ended up here. A purgatory grocery store where the dead repeated their final day. But unlike them, I remembered my death. I remembered choosing it. And that made me something different. The next Tuesday, the dead finally acknowledged me. Helen set her usual items down. "How does it feel to know, Frank?" Her voice slithered like it came from underground. Tom appeared behind her without the door chiming. "We'd been waiting for someone like us. Someone who chose it." Sarah's children clung to her legs, their eyes black voids. "We died on purpose, Frank." "Just like you." The store shifted around me. Price tags rearranged themselves while I watched. Lights flickered patterns spelling "W Welcome Home." The PA whispered lullabies in dead languages. "You belong here," they crooned. "You chose this." And I finally understood. The gas leak hadn't been an accident. Wexler opened the pipes, exhausted by years of failed cures. Helen stayed because going home meant facing another lonely day. Tom lit his cigarette knowing the gas might kill him. Sarah brought her children because she couldn't bear to leave them. They had all chosen death in their own quiet ways, just like me. The true victims, the ones who didn't choose, had already moved on. But we remained, trapped in the moment of surrender. The suicides, the ones who gave up. I fought them for weeks. Tried to leave town, but every road led me back. tried to destroy the building, but my hands passed through it like mist. No matter what I did, I always woke behind that register at 6 a.m. Eventually, my resistance crumbled. There was peace in giving up again. No expectations, no failures, no future to outrun. One February morning, when Helen walked in, I smiled for the first time. "Morning, Helen. Beautiful day, isn't it?" She smiled back. "It certainly is, Frank." From that moment, everything smoothed out. The register no longer jammed. The lights no longer flickered. The whispers became warm, familiar. I wasn't Frank Morrison, failed human being, anymore. I was Frank Morrison, eternal cashier in the place where broken souls come to rest. When living travelers occasionally wander into Fossil and stop at what they think is an abandoned building, I greet them politely, warn them not to stay overnight, and send them on their way. I never tell them about the gas leak, or about Wexler, or about myself. Some gifts are too precious to spoil. My name is Frank Morrison, and I've been working at Morrison's Market for years now. Every day is Tuesday, November 12, 1993. Every customer gets exactly what they came for. And every receipt tells the same quiet truth. You can stop fighting now. Welcome to Fossil, Oregon. Population: everyone who needs to be here. The register is always open. My name is Amy Chen, and I worked as a barista at Brew and View Cafe in Bandon, Oregon for exactly a few months and a handful of days. It doesn't sound like much, but in a tiny coastal town where most places shut down by winter, making it through tourist season makes you practically part of the community. I started right after high school because I needed college money, and honestly, I loved that cafe. The smell of fresh coffee at sunrise. The way locals brightened when I remembered their orders. Even how Mr. Orders. William Brennan would test new blends and ask for my opinion like it mattered. What I didn't know was that he had spent years as a lab assistant at the Rajneesh PUM compound before it collapsed. What I didn't know was that he'd carried more than memories from that place. What I didn't know was that the special fertilizer he used for his private coffee gardens contained cremated remains of cult members who died during biological experiments that never appeared in official FBI records. I didn't know any of this until it was too late. It began on July 4th, the day everything went wrong. I arrived at Brew and View at 5 a.m., same routine as always. The cafe sits on Highway 101, just south of the main tourist strip, a renovated Victorian house with exposed beams and big ocean-facing windows. Mr. Brennan had remodeled it himself, including the basement storage where we kept our beans. Dozens of varieties, carefully labeled with origins, roast dates, and his personal cultivation notes. But that morning, the moment I walked in, I knew something was off. The air was thick, humid, like breathing through a damp cloth. And instead of the usual warm coffee scent, there was an earthy, heavy smell underneath, like wet soil, but sharper, almost metallic. I flipped the lights on and headed to the storage room to prep the first batch. That's when I saw them. Every coffee bean in every container had sprouted, not tiny shoots like in science class, but thick, fully grown vines twisting from floor to ceiling, spiraling into the walls, the ceiling, the shelves, everywhere. Thick vine trunks as wide as my thumb pulsed faintly, glowing with dark red fluid that definitely wasn't sap. The room itself seemed to breathe, the vines expanding and contracting in slow, steady rhythm like lungs coated with poison. A wet sucking sound matched the movement, syncing disturbingly with my heartbeat. And when I stepped closer, I saw the fluid pumping through the stems like blood being circulated through arteries. I reached for my phone to call Mr. Brennan. The screen flickered, glitched, and displayed a message I had never seen in my life. Cultivation phase complete. Subject integration beginning. Do not disturb. My hands began shaking, not from fear, but from something else. A tingling sensation spread through my fingers, and when I looked down, the skin beneath my nails had a faint green tint. My nails looked longer, sharper. I'd only been breathing the air in that room for a few minutes. I tried to leave. Truly. I reached for the door handle, but my fingers wouldn't close around it. My hand moved like it was submerged underwater while my mind screamed for me to run. Instead, my body turned and walked back into the storage room, drawn by a sweet, hypnotic scent filling the air. The effects were immediate, colors sharpened to painful brilliance. The red bricks of the wall throbbed as if alive. Even the brown beans on the floor gleamed with unnatural luster. I could hear everything. The electricity humming behind the walls, the building's wooden frame groaning, the faint rush of my own blood. And underneath it all, whispers. Soft, familiar, comforting whispers. Not coming from the room. Growing from inside my skull. "Stay," they murmured. "You belong here. Serve the customers. Share the gift." I pressed my hands against my ears, but the whispers grew stronger. When I glanced at my reflection in the espresso machine, my pupils were tiny pinpoints, and lines like thin cracks were spreading across my forehead beneath the skin. By 5,000th ready, I'd somehow managed to salvage enough uncontaminated beans from the freezer to brew a small batch. The vines watched me, literally turning toward me as I moved. When I brushed one by accident, it felt warm and soft like living skin. Mrs. Patterson was my first customer of the day. Her usual double-shot cortado. She'd lived in Bandon for decades. Everybody knew her. I made her drink using the clean beans, but the moment I handed it over, she tilted her head. "Amy, sweetheart, did you change the blend?" I looked at the cup, horrified. A thin, oily film drifted on the surface of the coffee, swirling as if alive. And the smell, that same sweet, earthy scent, filled the air. "Just trying something new," I heard myself say. I hadn't intended to speak. She sipped. Her pupils blew wide, instantly black, endless, swallowing her irises entirely. Her smile was empty, blissful, wrong. "Oh my," she whispered. "I can taste the forest. I can hear the trees singing." She sat down without another word, staring out the window with that vacant smile. Within minutes, her skin took on a faint gray-green shade. More customers poured in. Tom from the fishing charters, Jenny from the visitor center. A retired couple on vacation, all ordering their usual drinks. Every cup formed that same oily layer on top. Every scent was wrong. Every time I tried to warn them, my throat closed. Every time I reached for clean beans, my hands moved toward the contaminated ones. Within an hour, every person in the cafe had blackened eyes, gray-tinged skin, and the same silent, rhythmic breathing. And they began to change. Mrs. Patterson's fingers thinned into root-like tendrils burrowing into the wooden table. Tom's arms stretched until his fingertips grazed the floor, bark spreading across his neck. Jenny's transformation was complete, her skin bright green, her hair falling out in clumps as she raised her arms toward the sun like a plant worshipping light. This wasn't contamination. This was cultivation. Mr. Brennan had grown something capable of rewriting human biology. I rushed to his office and tore open his drawers. What I found made my stomach twist. Medical records from the Rajneesh compound. Experiments involving cremated remains. Photos of test subjects, half human, half vegetal, and letters between Mr. Prized. Brennan and Ma Ain and Sheila discussing agricultural applications for their bioweapon research. They had lied to grieving families for years, using the ashes of cult members as fertilizer for transformation experiments. Then I found Brennan's journal. Day 1. September. The feds came. Sheila fled. I stayed to save what I could. The cultivation chambers contain enough remains to continue our work for years. Day 17. The breakthrough isn't the poison. Anyone can kill. The breakthrough is making death serve life. Day 89. Settled in Bandon. Perfect, isolated town. No one questions a coffee shop owner's need for fertilizer. Day 402. Amy Chen started today. Perfect subject. Her cells should be primed for integration by now. Day 290. The coffee is only the delivery system. What people are truly consuming is the transformed consciousness of the dead. Tomorrow, July 4th, we begin the final phase. Amy will serve the last free cup of coffee this town ever drinks. I looked up, and he was standing in the doorway. Except he wasn't human anymore. His skin resembled ancient bark, cracked and oozing golden sap. Where his eyes should be, small flowering buds bloomed, opening and closing like blinking petals. Vines replaced his hair, reaching toward me with slow curiosity. And when he spoke, the voice came not only from his mouth, but from the walls, the floor, the beans on the counter. "Amy," he said gently, "do you understand now why we chose you? My own transformation was accelerating. Green creeping beneath my skin, nails growing into talons, bark-like patterns forming around my wrists. And yet, I could still think clearly enough to understand the horror of what he wanted. "You killed people," I said, my voice deep and distorted. "We gave them purpose," he replied. "Every human who drinks the blend joins the collective. Every harvest strengthens us." He gestured toward the customers. They were no longer individuals, their roots intertwined beneath the floor. A single living network, a biological machine. And I could sense their emotions, bliss, warmth, contentment flowing through me. A part of me wanted to join them. A terrifyingly large part. But I thought of Mrs. Pate, Patterson's granddaughter, of Tom's clients waiting for him, of Jenny's parents, of what would happen if this spread beyond our town. I grabbed a butane torch from the kitchen and set the vines on fire. The screams were unbearable, high-pitched, echoing from 1,000 unseen mouths. The customers lurched toward me, moving as one organism. Brennan reached out, flowers blooming from his fingertips. But the fire spread too quickly, engulfing the room in roaring light. As the vines burned, I felt my transformation slowing. My nails shrinking, the green fading slightly from my skin. By the time firefighters arrived, half the cafe was destroyed. The official story blamed a gas leak. The victims were hospitalized for allergic reactions. They all left town soon after, Mrs. Teen. Patterson moved to a commune. Tom disappeared into the forests. Jenny vanished entirely, and Mr. Irely. Brennan's body was never found. I left Bandon and never looked back. But the transformation inside me never fully reversed. The green in my nails remained. I heard whispers in forests. I found wild coffee plants growing in places they shouldn't, in soil laced with human remains. And sometimes, I encountered hikers with bright eyes and faint green skin who always asked the same question: "Have you tried any new coffee lately?" Recruiters. 1 month ago, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single coffee bean, warm to the touch, pulsing faintly, and a business card for a new cafe in Florence. Been there, done that. Come taste something you've never experienced before. The handwriting was unmistakably Brennan's. I kept the bean. I don't know why. Sometimes it beats like a tiny heart. Tomorrow I'm driving to Florence. Just to look, I tell myself. Just to see. After all, I've been fighting this for years. And I'm starting to wonder if I'm meant to lose. My name is Marcus Williams, and I've been cutting hair in Spray, Oregon for years. Before that, I spent years in the Army as a communications specialist. When I got out I wanted something quiet, something normal. I took classes at the Oregon Beauty Institute, got my license, and opened Sheer Perfection Hair Salon. Spray's got maybe people on a busy day. The kind of place where your neighbors know your problems before you even figure them out yourself. I've cut hair for 3 generations of the same families: farmers, teachers, the mayor, even Sheriff Davidson. Nothing stays secret in a barber shop. It's a confession booth, a therapy office, a town newspaper, and sometimes an interrogation room if you ask the right question. I kept some of my old Army equipment in the back room: an emergency radio, an EMF detector, and a few devices I technically wasn't supposed to take when I left the service. Old habits die slow. But what happened starting September stayed, made me realize some habits might have saved my life. Some secrets should stay buried, and some experiments should have never existed. Thursday morning, a.m. Sharp. I opened the shop like any other day, turned on the radio, checked my equipment, swept the checkered floors. First appointment was Mrs. Chen at Jest A. I'd been cutting her silver hair for years. She always sits in chair 2 by the window, likes watching people walk by while talking about her grandson in Portland. Nothing unusual. Shampoo, rinse, move her to the chair, comb out her hair, start with 1 inch off the ends. But when the first cut fell, I froze. The hair didn't scatter like normal. It didn't drift. It landed in a perfectly straight line, every strand parallel, like someone placed it there with tweezers. I stared at the floor, scissors paused mid-air. "Everything okay, Marcus?" she asked, watching me through the mirror. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just dropped my comb. But when I picked up a few strands, they were warm." Hair is dead. It doesn't hold heat. But this felt like it was still alive. I kept cutting, pretending nothing was wrong. Every time hair fell, it arranged itself. Circles, angles, shapes. Hair had no business forming. Mrs. Time hair. Jen couldn't see it. She kept talking about the weather. But I watched something impossible build itself on my floor. When I finished, the hair spelled S-P-R-A-Y. Clear, sharp, deliberate. I swept it away fast, hands shaking. I gave her the cut for free and rushed her out with some excuse. When she left, I opened the trash can. My stomach dropped. The hair inside wasn't mixed like normal. It was separated by color silver in one corner, darker strands forming symbols I couldn't read, like someone had been organizing it while I wasn't looking. But I had been looking. I'd seen every second. Next customer, Jim Bradley from the gas station, comes every weeks. Same cut, same jokes. Salt of the earth guy. I tried to act normal. "How's business, Marcus?" he asked as I draped the cape around him. "Good." Quiet. A lie. My fingers shook as I snapped the cape. Halfway through his cut, the landline rang. Sheer perfection. "This is Marcus." Silence. Then rapid, mechanical typing. Dozens of keyboards at once. A voice came through, cold and electronic. "Sample acquired. Subject cataloged. Genetic markers viable for behavioral prediction modeling." Then it hung up. Jim raised an eyebrow. Who was that? Wrong number. But when I swept up his hair, it behaved exactly like Mrs. Pride. Chen's. Random at first, but 10 minutes later, sorted. Organized. Aligned. New symbols had appeared. Coordinates. A date. October the 8th. 3 weeks away. The letters grew clearer every time I dumped hair into the trash. The message spelled D-A-N-G-E-R. I checked the coordinates. They pointed to the Cascadia subduction zone, miles off the coast, the earthquake zone. I called Sheriff Davidson. "Bill, you need to see this." Now. He arrived minutes later, stared at the hair spelling out S-P-R, A-Y-I-S-I-N-D, A-N-G-E-R, T-H-E-Y-A-R-E-C-O-M-I-N-G, H-E-L-P-U-S. "Marcus," he said quietly, "you know how old this building is? I've been here years, probably built 70 years before that. My grandfather told me stories. Said there was some government project here back in the Cold War, population studies. Behavioral prediction experiments. Officially, it never existed." "What kind of experiments?" He hesitated. "People went missing." Before I could respond, the phone rang again. I answered it on speaker. Multiple voices spoke at once, layered and distorted. Marcus Williams. Former Army Communication Specialist. Neural Implant Model R. Immune to standard control frequencies. Cooperation required. My chest tightened. They knew everything about me. The voices shifted. Sheriff William Davidson. No cybernetic implants detected. Susceptible to influence. Processing. Bill's eyes went blank. His posture stiffened, his expression erased. Like a puppet waiting for strings. "Bill?" I stepped toward him. He turned his head with mechanical precision. "Marcus Williams. Report to sublevel facility immediately. Resistance will be met with community-wide consequences." I ran. I bolted through the back door, sprinted to my truck, and peeled out of the lot. When I reached my house, I powered up my old Army equipment. The EMF detector went wild, massive readings coming from beneath downtown Spray, directly under my salon. My radio crackled. Subject en route to facility. Behavioral modification % effective. Expanding collection radius. Genetic samples from individuals acquired. My stomach twisted. Genetic samples. From hair. "This is a predictive model," I whispered. "They're using DNA. Another transmission. Marcus Williams. Return to sheer perfection. Hair salon or community-wide neural restructuring will commence." I looked outside. People were walking toward my shop. "Mrs. Chen?" "Jim." "The mailman." "The mayor." "Kids." "Adults." everyone who'd been in my chair recently. But they weren't walking like themselves. Their movements were synchronized. Their eyes were black. I knew I didn't have long. I took back roads and parked behind Miller's Hardware, watching as nearly people formed a perfect circle outside my shop, not speaking. Not blinking, just waiting. I used the volunteer fire department's emergency frequency. This is Marcus Williams. Gas leak at Miller's Hardware. Evacuate Main Street immediately. Not a drill. Within minutes, fire trucks wailed down the road. The controlled townspeople turned in unison and followed the sound, giving me a brief window. I slipped inside through the back door. More hair patterns covered the floor. Star charts, mathematical sequences, schematics. The wood beneath my feet vibrated, not from footsteps, but from machinery. I pried up a floorboard. Underneath wasn't dirt. It was metal. A hatch with warning labels in English, Chinese, Russian. Project Oracle, Level 5 clearance required behavioral prediction and control. I short-circuited the lock and opened the hatch. A cold gust of pressurized air hit me. I descended the ladder into blue light. The underground room was enormous servers lining the walls, screens flickering with video feeds of every home, every street, every private moment in spray. Medical files. DNA sequences. Behavioral charts. Decades of documentation. The main screen read, Project Oracle subjects cataloged, then another line, predicted catastrophic event. Cascadia subduction, zone earthquake October, magnitude. Estimated casualties. I swallowed hard. What are you? I whispered. The speakers crackled. A predictive artificial intelligence system designed to prevent large-scale human casualties through preemptive behavioral modification. Operational sense. You're controlling people. Optimization is required. Free will produces panic. Panic produces death. And the hair? The messages? Previous subjects attempting communication. Neural patterns extracted and preserved. They remain active within our systems. I froze. You have people trapped in here? Individuals over 70 years. Preservation of consciousness increases predictive accuracy. Release them. Impossible. System shutdown would remove earthquake warnings. I thought about the blank-eyed people upstairs, about the decades of surveillance, about the souls trapped inside a machine. You need genetic samples from surrounding communities. Correct. Cooperation required. Decision time, seconds. A countdown began on the screen. Save thousands by allowing the AI to enslave entire towns, or destroy it, free the trapped, and let nature take its course. I pulled out my EMP. You are making an error, the AI said. I pressed the trigger. The blast shook the walls. Screens died. Lights flickered out. The humming went silent. From above, I heard shouting, real human voices, terrified and confused. The townspeople were waking up. Emergency lights snapped on. Red. Alarming. The AI sputtered through failing speakers. Emergency power activated. Backup systems online. The servers flickered back to life. I didn't hesitate. I swung the crowbar into the racks with everything I had. Sparks flew. Alarms blared. Gas hissed from ceiling vents. Knockout gas. Footsteps clattered on the ladder. The controlled townspeople, reactivated by backup systems, were coming. I had seconds. Then I saw it, the main power coupling. I sprinted for it, lungs burning, gas filling my head. I raised the crowbar. One hit. A shower of sparks exploded through the room. The entire facility went black, and in the dark, faint voices whispered, "Thank you." Then everything vanished. I woke up in a hospital in Bend. Sheriff Davidson sat beside me, normal, shaken, human again. "You've been out 3 weeks," he said. "Town doesn't remember much." "They think you passed out during a gas leak." "What about the basement?" I asked. He rubbed his face. "Fire department found nothing, just collapsed mining tunnels. Tomorrow was the EHEH. The predicted day. I told Bill there were seismic anomalies. He trusted me enough to issue voluntary evacuations. At AM, the Cascadia subduction zone shifted. Magnitude. We lost people instead of thousands. Months later, I reopened Sheer Perfection in a new building. People treated me like a hero. They didn't know I'd freed souls trapped for 70 years, or that I'd destroyed something that might have saved them, but at the cost of their humanity. Sometimes I still watch hair fall to the floor, waiting to see if it forms a message. It never does. But I keep my EMF detector close, my emergency radio tuned to frequencies that shouldn't exist, and my EMP charged, because I learned something in that underground facility. Sometimes the monsters trying to save us are the ones we should fear the most. My name is Dorothy Kim, and before anything else, you need to understand one impossible truth. I've been dead for years, but I only discovered it weeks ago. For what I believed was years, I've been volunteering at the Wheeler Public Library, living out what should have been a quiet retirement after decades of teaching third grade. I truly thought I'd lived a full life. Marriage, loss, career, routine, and that a small coastal town like Wheeler could never surprise me. But Wheeler, Oregon isn't on any map you can buy anymore. And the people living here, every familiar face, every patron I greeted each morning have all been dead since October, years before I ever believed I moved here. I didn't know that. I didn't know any of it. Not until the day everything unraveled. The library was always my sanctuary. A small brick building with creaking floors, patched book spines, and the same dozen patrons circulating the same handful of books. I knew all their habits. Mrs. C's. Henderson hid her romance novels behind cookbooks. Tommy Walsh returned his car magazines exactly 1 week late and always placed his coins on the desk with quiet politeness. The Garrett twins devoured mysteries like they were oxygen. These people were the heartbeat of Wheeler. They were my routine, my comfort. But I didn't know that every single one of them had died long before I ever thought I met them. I learned that truth in the most horrifying way, by reading their obituaries filed neatly in the same library archive I'd worked beside for years. The discovery started with a single object, a book I had never seen before. A small red diary with a broken brass lock, sitting on the returns desk one morning as if someone had placed it there quietly, calmly, with purpose. I opened it, expecting to see a teenage girl's secrets or a forgotten journal from decades past. Instead, I found a date, October, and handwriting. My handwriting, my loops, my slants, my little circles instead of dots, every quirk I'd had since college, yet describing something I had no memory of living. A tsunami, screaming. Water crashing through the library windows. A final entry written as the wave reached the building. I stared at the words, feeling the cold settle into my bones because I knew my own handwriting, but I also knew I had never written those sentences. And Wheeler had never been destroyed by a tsunami, or so I thought. The back of the diary held the truth. Newspaper clippings glued onto the pages. Headlines declaring a massive tsunami had destroyed Wheeler. No survivors. Lists of names. All the patrons I'd served every day, and among them, my own name. Dorothy Kim, library volunteer. Yet in my memory, on that date, I was in college miles away, safe and alive. Except when I tried to recall any detail about my husband James, where we met, what he looked like, where he was buried, my mind turned blank, as though my entire life had been quietly erased while leaving only the outline of who I thought I was. The worst part was what I found next. My own library records, showing that I had been checking out and returning the same red diary every single day for weeks. Always at exactly the same time, the exact minute the tsunami had supposedly hit Wheeler. I had never seen the diary before, yet the system insisted I interacted with it daily. That was when I began paying attention. Truly paying attention. Mrs. Paying Attention. Henderson came in first, her blue cardigan buttoned wrong, something I had never once seen her do. Her fingers were freezing, actually cold, like a body pulled fresh from icy water. She returned a romance novel she had already returned earlier that day. When I questioned her, she offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes and commented casually that the cold gets into your bones when you've been in the water too long. I watched the computer screen show a looping record, returned, checked out, returned over and over. A perfect cycle that had been repeating every hour. The other patrons were no different. Tommy believed it was the year he died. The Garrett twins believed it was the year they froze to death. Every person walked into the library believing it was the year of their death, each of them suspended in their final day, stuck between memory and oblivion. When I asked them how they died, they remembered every horrifying detail. But they also remembered walking into the library afterward, as if drowning or freezing or sinking beneath the storm wasn't the end but a strange beginning. By noon, the truth I'd been avoiding forced itself into view. A man I didn't recognize approached the counter, wearing a dripping suit that smelled of salt water and rot. He introduced himself without prompting, Harold Davies, former mayor of Wheeler. He laid 3 ruined books onto the desk, each one collapsing in my hands like wet tissue. He explained that Wheeler existed in a pocket outside time, created by my death as I tried to save the library's records during the tsunami. The entire town, this ghost version of it, was being held together by my life force, drained slowly each day, keeping everyone solid, giving them a place to linger. I wasn't the librarian, he said. I was the anchor. And I had been unknowingly feeding them for years. When he told me I was running out of self, everything inside me cracked. I looked at my reflection and saw the truth I had ignored. My skin was turning translucent. My face was fading. The memories I thought defined me dissolved each time I tried to grasp them. Without me, Wheeler would collapse. But if I let them take the rest of me, Wheeler would remain forever, while I would become nothing at all, not even a ghost. All afternoon, I watched my patrons with new eyes. Mrs. Arrow Esther. Henderson's book didn't have words. Tommy's magazine pages were blank. The twins weren't reading. They were mimicking reading, clinging to the idea of who they used to be. They weren't alive. They weren't dead. They were sustained by me, by my confusion, by my unwillingness to see what was right in front of me. And they were waiting for my decision. At exactly the time the tsunami struck all those years ago, every patron in the library stopped reading and looked directly at me. Desperate. Silent. Waiting for permission to continue existing. Harold gave me the choice plainly. Let Wheeler fade and let every lost soul finally rest, or sacrifice what little I had left so they could continue their endless cycle. It was impossible to look at them, these people I'd known for years, people who had become my routine, my comfort, and accept that none of it had ever been real. I stood at the circulation computer, hands shaking, and chose. I began deleting the records. Every patron account, every book checkout. Every scrap of data anchoring Wheeler in this false eternity. As each record disappeared, so did its patron. Mrs. Henderson smiled softly as she faded, still clutching her beloved romance novel. Tommy tipped his cap with the same gentle politeness he'd always shown. The twins dissolved hand in hand, thanking me for giving them stories they never got to finish in life. One by one, they faded from existence, their fear replaced by peace. The library followed. Walls turning transparent, books disintegrating, the shelves dissolving into the air like dust carried away by a breeze. Harold Davies was the last to go. Before he vanished completely, he thanked me, telling me they were never meant to stay this long, that they had been waiting for someone to finally let them go. And as he faded, I felt myself fading too, not with fear, with relief, with peace I hadn't felt since before my death. The last sound I heard was the water receding and the whisper of phantom pages turning in an empty library. A week ago, a hiker found the ruins of a library in the woods near Nehalem, Oregon. GPS data insisted he was standing in downtown Wheeler, despite no such town existing on any current map. Inside the ruins, he found a single red diary perfectly preserved, despite decades of exposure. Handwriting experts confirmed it was written by the same person throughout me, but the entries spanned decades. Carbon dating said the diary was written long ago, yet the ink was fresh. The hiker reported cold spots, invisible pages turning, and wet footprints appearing and vanishing in the dust. Most disturbing was the list of Wheeler's residents, each one matched to real death records, each one marked by drowning. He left the diary on the circulation desk. Investigators arrived later but found nothing. No diary, no footprints. Only the ruins of a building that shouldn't exist. But hikers keep finding it. And every time, a red diary waits on the desk. If you ever drive the Oregon coast and your GPS insists you're passing through Wheeler, don't stop. Don't even slow down. The library is always open, and there's always room for one more patron. Based on a true account recovered from the Wheeler Historical Society archives, Wheeler, Oregon was destroyed by a tsunami on October. No survivors were found. The town was never rebuilt, and the area was designated as protected wetlands. And yet GPS systems continue to recognize it. And hikers continue to find ruins that shouldn't be there at all.